Let's go. All right, so we're going to talk about morality. So maybe we can try to define morality, and it's a very hard concept to define. Yet, I think, like you were saying before, Matthew, it's particularly relevant in this discussion. So maybe we can start by trying to define morality. Who wants to go first and give it a go?
So I guess I'll go first, just if no one else is speaking up, because I've been working on this in my mind for a couple months now, and that's actually, this is where it first brought up on the Facebook chat. I was struggling with this, but I still have an answer. But the closest I have gotten is I'm taking a phenomenological point of view. So you're experiencing at certain points in time a moral choice. Like, okay, like walking down the street, that's not a moral choice. But even though you could say, oh, well, it's more moral to walk down the street than to kill everyone you pass on the street. Well, no, but most people aren't going to kill everyone they pass on the street. They're just going to walk on the street. So it's not really a real choice that's being presented. So the phenomenon of morality seems to come up when ever there seems to be two competing drives, two or more competing interests in a person, and they have a sense of that formally one interest ought to supersede the other interest. Doesn't mean it's this choice that they make, but they do have a sense that one interest is more valuable somehow. That is kind of the direction I have gone with that, because it allows us to just kind of circumvent issues of, you know, it's the right decision, like drinking water is the right decision when you're thirsty, but it's not a moral choice. And making a right turn to go to a building that's off to the right is the right choice, I guess, in a couple of ways, but it's not really a moral one. But there's still moral choices that is a different kind of
Recording in progress.
as opposed to another.
Okay, so you're almost like trying to define it in terms of a priorities, right? Like something that's priority over another thing.
Right. I prioritize my health, and I also really enjoy the taste of Oreos. Those are both drives, right? And I may choose the Oreos, right? I may say, I just really, really like how Oreos taste. But if my sense of morality might say that that health is a higher value than good flavor, then in spite of me making that, then I will have felt the wrong choice, and then I may feel guilty for it. But that's the crucial aspect, is I may look at the salad as actually a moral choice in this context, because I was pulled away from it, but it was still the correct one. Now I may also choose a salad, but I still felt the draw, a competing draw, to have the Oreo instead. And that was what suddenly in that moment made me feel like this was a moral decision.
I don't want to be an echo chamber, but this is what I have on my refrigerator.
What does it say? Nothing tastes as satisfying as good health feels. Yeah.
Doesn't always work, but sometimes it does.
Most of the time, it's good enough.
Motivations, I think, would be a good way of putting it.
And this is not on the list.
It's heart healthy.
Yeah. That's what they would have us believe.
That's what, yeah. And apparently, the research is not really that clear on it.
Yeah.
What,
So-
what about the rest of you guys? What do you think about what morality is? Do you have an answer ready for that question, or how do you see it?
Um, I I I I tend to think morality in terms of as a social, I wouldn't say construct, but it's important in terms of a social rather than individual level. And probably morality is and this is very vague. I'm just groping with this. It's a set of rules or norms that we arrive at in order that society is able to function in a way that is beneficial, or at the very least acceptable to enough people, to the point such that society doesn't break down. You know, and whether something is good or bad is, there is really no intrinsic good or bad. It's basically what in the end society sort of converges on. But again, with the caveat that we have some certain basic, for whatever, call it mental instincts or impulses that we have acquired through evolution. Like, for example, you don't ever see a society where they say, oh, it's okay for people to kill children randomly at random. It's perfectly fine. I don't think there's such a society. Or
Child sacrifice, Mervyn, but
yeah, but it's not at random. It's not. There's always justification if they do that human sacrifice and all that. There's a way to justify it, but I don't think there's ever a society where it's, oh, you can go out one day when we feel like it, just kill your neighbor's child, or just kill your own child. So.
But so one thing I'm interested. So you said it's rules that help keep a society together. So there's lots of sustainable systems for how a society could work that
Right.
we might still feel are immoral. Like for example, you could say that slavery is sustainable. Like
Yeah.
it could go on for a long time and not break down, but we still
Right.
might not feel it's moral, I guess.
Yeah, but for hundreds of, well, not, I wouldn't say hundreds of thousands of years, for tens of thousands of years, the human civilization has basically accepted slavery as something that's fine, right? Or you get the small bands in, for example, New Guinea, and it's perfectly fine. It's not immoral in their societies to kill a stranger who stumbles into their territory, and they have justification for it. They say, well, whatever. It's not thought of as just a random act of thrill seeking or cruelty. And I'm glad that at least for us, morality has evolved beyond that. But if I judge them on their own, not on our own standards, you can't say that by their own moral standards, doing that is immoral.
Sorry.
Now, let me make sure I understand. Are you saying that slavery was morally justified in the past, but it's not today?
Yes, in the past, in certain societies in the past, like Aristotle certainly justified slavery, and Nietzsche seemed to be perfectly happy with that. At least, the way he kind of denigrates slave morality as something that's, we don't really know what Nietzsche thought because his works were heavily edited, I heard, by his sister or brother.
Well, it's also true that I don't know if Nietzsche actually said anything about actual
Yeah.
slavery. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I would say, you know, saying something about slave morality is very different from condoning slavery, right? I mean, we can't.
Did we lose Bruno again?
Oh, Bruno hanging out a little.
Oh yeah, that's I didn't mean that he condoned it, but I'm just saying just from his attitude that he kind of preferred the master morality over the, kind of denigrated it. And I don't know if that's really him or just the way he was edited by posthumously, or at least by his sister. Yeah.
So the thing that I think about when this kind of it gets brought up is it starts to get really close to jumping ahead to the question of what is moral as opposed to what is morality, which is still important, and maybe we'll end up there.
Sure.
But I think this is the position I take, and I don't know if people would agree with this or not. But like let's say for the next 2 minutes, let's say that we figured it out. We know that for a fact somehow that there's an objective morality, and this is what it is. We figured it out. There's still other people out there who don't know that, who disagree with that objective morality. They happen to be wrong because they don't know the things that we do, but they still believe in morality, right? They still follow a moral code even if it's the wrong one. So that's kind of some of the questions I think that is worth like thinking about, considering when trying to determine what is morality, is because regardless of what the answer is, regardless of objectiveness or subjectiveness or even arbitrariness, there seems to be a point of discussion where if two people are shouting at each other about what's moral, they seem to still they seem to agree with each other. That they're talking about the same thing at least. So or maybe they don't, but there seems to be that almost contract in the fact that they're even discussing it or shouting at each other about it, that they are talking about the same topic. So what's the isness? That's
Yeah, so it's kind of like you're saying there's what's the answer, and then there's what's even the question.
That's the question.
Yeah, so when we say when we try to figure out what is moral, forget the answer to that question. What are we even asking is kind of what you're saying.
I think that's a good point. Thanks for making that point, because we're driving a little bit ahead of ourselves. So let's go back to and I like the way you put it, Michael. Before we define the answer, let's define the question. And that's exactly it. I think what is morality is the question, and then the answer will be like at the end is like what is moral, right? But we got to start by trying to figure out what the question is, what we're talking about. And well, let me propose, and you guys tell me if you object to that or not. Morality is about right and wrong, figuring out whether something is right or if something is wrong. Is there a problem with that?
Kind of circular though, like right and wrong and morality are mean the same. Like, yeah, I feel like you could say what's right and wrong. It's whatever's moral. It's kind of like just another. It's kind of like a synonym.
It's kind of redundant.
Is it redundant?
Yeah.
Or you could look at it from a question of ends. It's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. Is if let's say I don't know, I am okay, here we go. So I'm trying to drive to Milwaukee, let's say, all the way to Milwaukee. I could take the highway, or I could take the small roads near the highway. If my goal is to get there as fast as possible, there's a clear right and wrong decision to take the highway to the end of getting there as fast as possible. If my goal is to maybe have the best fuel economy, I might take the slower road, right? And that's, but still, there's a right and a wrong decision. But is it a moral decision? And I don't feel like it's a moral decision, even though there is still a right or a wrong. It's the end, because the end doesn't seem to be categorically moral, at least to me.
My question is, I understand what is being said when the idea is put forth that there is no ultimate first principle right and wrong. But at the same time, you using your example of wanting to get Milwaukee, it may be true that there's no specific right or wrong answer to that. But if the objective is to get to Milwaukee as quickly as you can, we can pretty much be confident that driving a car is faster than walking.
Yes, that's a great point.
So, and riding a bicycle would be faster than walking. So if the dichotomy is this is better than that, then really there's many peaks in the moral landscape and many valleys in the moral landscape. It's kind of like health. You know, we know that a good diet and exercise are good for us, you know, and we all have different opinions about what is a good diet, you know, but at the same time, we also know unnecessarily poisoning someone or amputating a limb is not good for health. You know, so while we may not have the ultimate answers, we do know some of the
Right. Yeah.
Well, Matthew, I think you're pointing out the question that well, sometimes something can be right or wrong. You know, you can have a right or wrong answer, but that still is lacking a moral quality to it.
Right.
Right. So
Yes.
basically you're saying we can't define it in terms of what's right and what's wrong, because sometimes what's right and what's wrong seems to lack what we think about when we think about morality.
I think that actually the more, I wouldn't say meaningful, but the question that is probably needs to be more urgently tackled is not really what is right or wrong, but how does society, or how can society arrive at the decision, or arrive at determining what is right and what is wrong. You know, how do you negotiate that thing, that, because especially in this day and age where the contact between it's unavoidable, intercourse between different societies having different values is unavoidable, and so a big problem is arriving at that sort of negotiated settlement as to okay, what is it that we will agree is right and wrong, maybe not even a personal sense, but maybe even in just a legalistic sense, or a sense of social norms, so as to reduce conflict between, for example, pro-life and pro-choice, or and other different sectors of society, or different societies, and that's something that I think a lot of people have been writing about today, about how do we arrive at that and avoid killing each other over what is to be considered right or wrong. No.
Yeah. So in your view, morality is like this practical thing where we try to negotiate with one another and reach an agreement. So it's not something that comes from some fundamental source or
Right. I mean,
that's-
there might be something that's a really objective, true morality, but who's to say what it is, right? Like, if you search for truth, how do you know when it's right in front of you? There's really no way. I mean, so I would set that problem aside and just say, okay, maybe consensus of all the different voices, hopefully, might arrive at, yeah.
So you're saying if the majority of society has a certain point of view, that is the correct point of view?
I wouldn't say correct point of view. I would say that's what we probably have to live with. Right.
The majority
but
feels
it's not majority. I wouldn't say majority. It's what you know, the negotiated settlement that we reach at.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so help me out here. How did the negotiated settlement work out for people in Africa when Europeans decided to enslave them?
Oh, it was not a negotiated settlement. You know, so I'm not going to say what the situation or the status quo that was established there. I would never say is something that was a moral arrangement.
or sometimes there's a negotiation. It's just not a fair negotiation.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. I guess
Yeah.
it's like yeah.
I would and correct me if I'm wrong, Raul,
yeah,
but I might compare it to the sort of consensus that we form around speaking common language. Like we don't necessarily like sit down and have
yeah,
or you know, or do hand signs or something, be like, let's call this apple. Like,
right,
like it's just something that kind of develops, and the consensus is you grows up because maybe everyone has a slightly different version, but between their experiences common and different, interacting with each other, they end up having somehow, you know, the magic biology or whatever it happens to be,
right,
you know, a way of recognizing a certain point of view. And similarly, language, like we're clearly communicating right now,
right.
but is language something that is universal in the sense that everyone will always understand each other? Well, no. I mean, the way things are structured are vastly different. But there's clearly in various localities, you know, consensus on how to speak with each other, how to communicate.
Right.
Even within that community, there's a little bit of differences, you know, there's variety, but on average, they can communicate with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I use the term negotiated, but that's more metaphorical than, I don't really mean a formal negotiation, but it's just, you know, you arrive at a status quo that hopefully allows, you know, some semblance of agreement and cooperation and less violence than without it. So, but yeah.
Well, I'm not entirely satisfied with our definition of the question. You know what morality is, because it doesn't seem like we've really figured out what makes something moral or not, or you know what transforms something that is right or wrong into something that is morally right or morally wrong. So I think we kind of still need to at least attempt to answer that question.
I mean, is there any merit to going through the different, like utilitarianism and deontology and all these things, or
Well, those
or-
are all answers
or
to
is
the
that
question of what
basically something
morality.
that are already in the back of our mind, and we don't need to make it explicit? I mean,
Well, I think all of those theories, they're trying to establish what's moral and what's not moral, but they're not necessarily
Right.
trying to figure out, what morality is
No.
in the first place. They're not trying to figure out what the question is in the first place, like we were saying.
mhm, mhm.
So I think, for example, like what Matthew said before, when we have to figure out the question is like, what are we even talking about when we talk about morality, right? What makes something
Right.
moral or not? Like what maybe that will help us with the discussion a little bit later, is if we at least try to figure out somehow like what where does this moral quality comes from. Obviously, like Matthew said, figuring out what the shortest way to get to Milwaukee is, that's not moral, but perhaps
So if I understand how you're framing the question, you're asking what is morality, not what is a moral action.
Correct.
yes, why do we talk about morality in the first place? So what is morality? What do we mean by morality?
Why do we distinguish it from the other, the types of decisions that we're motivated to make? Like, why is there this special category?
So basically, why do
other
we
category.
why do we say that figuring out the shortest way to Milwaukee is not moral? Why do we all say that? What is that decision lacking?
Right. I think what it's lacking is that it's not a balancing of your self-interest, of your benefit with the benefit or costs or of others. And I think morality is our way of balancing that, what we feel is a fair balance, okay, or maybe one that leaves people fairly happy. I use fair in two different ways, but maybe morality is always in terms of your selfish interest and the interest of others, and now it's not just other people, it's also the interest of animals who obviously don't want to be in pain.
So
Right.
would you say that morality is the concern with a human flourishing?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's part and parcel of it, I would say.
okay. I actually do like the term flourishing. I want to think on that a little bit but before I go there, I also wanted, I guess I'll ask you a question. What would you say to someone who says, and this is not meant to be a hypothetical from nowhere. This is something I've encountered with people. So this is a real anecdote. What do you say to someone who says that a particular action is morally wrong, even if it doesn't affect anybody else? So for example, masturbation. Like if it's a single person, they want to be single all their life, no interaction with other people, but they still believe that masturbation is morally incorrect. Doesn't impact any people. They recognize that.
Right.
It's still morally wrong. What would you say to that person? Would you say they've got the wrong category? They're not talking about morality at all even anymore? Or would you still accept that they are, in their mind, they're still experiencing that moral decision the same way they would experience other moral decisions that do affect other people?
I would ask him, what does he believe? Why does he believe that to be so? And if he says, well, because it's against my religion, then I would say that is not okay, I'm trying to put this into, that is more a constructed moral precept rather than,
To say that masturbation is morally wrong, or to believe that masturbation is morally wrong, is to make a claim about reality.
right,
And
But
in my opinion, it's an unfounded claim.
right.
Well,
dependent.
how is it a claim about reality? So it's a claim of,
Well, if you're saying that if you perform this action on yourself, it is morally wrong, I think that is a claim about reality. That
well, I guess when I think like a claim about reality, I think like a scientific claim or like something that can be measured.
now let me give you an example that's clearly not scientific.
Yeah,
God created the earth in 6 days.
that's scientific.
I don't think so.
No, it's not.
But,
No.
no, I guess not whether it's true or false. I guess it's making a statement.
Well,
in other words, scientific claim could be false, but
True and
says something
false
about the
are very
stuff.
important to me. And you are making a claim about reality if you say that the universe was created in 6 days.
Yeah.
So that I mean, a little further because it was again with the same person, the same anecdote.
Right,
They believed that for the to be true of themselves. They thought if they did that, it would be morally incorrect. But they placed no moral judgment on others who did that. They said if it's not against their morality, then it's completely
Right.
fine. So it's not even like a universal claim about this is the state of reality. This is objectively wrong. It's immoral for me to do this thing,
and
even though I don't think it affects any
Sure.
other people. Moral for me to do it. You know that's and I guess I can't say what their justification is. I didn't
Right.
ask. However, one possibility is there's a professor of moral psychology. I think his name is Jonathan Haidt. I don't know.
Yeah.
Haidt. And he has this idea of moral matrices. And one of the I can't think of the term. One of the parts of the matrix, one of the
Right.
ways you can that he found that people were assessing around the world morality was a concept of
Right.
purity, right? Purity. You could make arguments perhaps about how certain times purity could be conceived to affect other people, but it was actually distinguished from other categories that were social. It was a matter of, okay, I don't want to eat GMOs because GMOs are unpure, or I won't want to eat drink alcohol because alcohol is unpure, or caffeine, or multiple different drugs.
Yeah.
Like, they're unpure, they're impure, therefore they are morally wrong.
yeah, and he's basing it on the basic instinct that we have of disgust. And so I would say if he says, I think that's morally wrong, but I'm only imposing it on myself. And this is again the sort of things that society will have to negotiate. What are the things that we believe should be imposed on people, and what are things that, oh, okay, you want to believe that, that's fine, it doesn't hurt anyone as long as you don't impose it on other people. And
This is kind of interesting. So I have a question. Are humans the only animal that tries to convince other members of the species that something is wrong? Like, we have a way of trying to convince other people things are right or wrong. Do other animals do that?
I haven't said anything yet much in this conversation, but definitely other animals behave that way. Study about the behavior of wolf packs, and you'll find out very quickly, you'll learn some things about morality that the human race could pick up a lot from. So yes, definitely animals have morality.
Not just do they have it, do they try to convince other members? Like, do they, I guess they don't have language, so they can't really put together a good argument for why something is right or wrong. I feel like only humans can do that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we can't really know what animals are thinking when we can only infer or hypothesize. But certainly a sense of fairness, what looks like a sense of fairness, exists in certain quote unquote higher animals. You've seen it in your own dogs when you seem to favor the other dog over one dog over the other, and it looks like the other one's throwing a tantrum, or at least is sulking. And experiments with certain animals, like I think vervet monkeys and others, have shown that they do react in a way that seems like they're upset if, for example, you give one monkey a grape rather than a cucumber for the same task. The one who gets a cucumber will react once he sees that the other monkey gets a grape, which is tastier than a cucumber. So I think there's basic. I don't know what it is. You can't jump to it, but there is this sense of
Fair enough.
and yeah, that they've been treated unfairly, and they react against that. And experiments on infants and toddlers also bear that
And it's
out.
interesting. I remember watching March of the Penguins, and all the penguins, mothers, they have their babies, and sometimes a mother's baby will die, and she'll try to steal the baby of another penguin. And then the other penguins will see her trying to do that and try to stop her because it's unfair. So that's a really interesting example I saw of morality in animals.
Yeah.
So the example I also thought of, I don't really know if this is morality or not, and that comes down to, I think.
But let me, Matthew, before you go to the second example, I think the one answer that I have for your first example is that morality is not really about society, even though it might be connected to society. I don't think we really think in those terms. I think morality is really about the individual, and he is trying to decide what he should do or what he should not do, what he ought to do or ought not to do. And most times, granted, that does relate to society, other people, but it's not always the case. There are many instances in which that's not the case.
So these,
Like, I've been thinking regarding purity related to like alcohol and sex and that stuff. I've been thinking the basis probably has something to do with like alcohol can cause people to act out with, as far as sexual stuff, it probably has something to do with that, like a belief that should be reserved for marriage, or that like it should be kept sacred.
Yeah,
So
that's another example, of something that is not related really to other people. It's like the individual is choosing for himself, like what he should do or should not do, but not necessarily for other people in that case.
What's really interesting is sometimes I think historically moral attitudes have developed towards certain things, and those moral attitudes have practical benefits that the people don't even realize. So like I'll give an example. So like a lot of the Jewish religion, ritual hand you do a ritual hand washing. Before you do a whole bunch of other things, you do a ritual hand washing. And it seems like that has no practical benefits really, but actually it helped reduce, for example, the Black Plague. And obviously, I don't think the Jews realized that that's what was doing it, but it just accidentally had that effect. And I wonder if, like, sometimes throughout history, there's things like that where people develop attitudes like about like what should be done, and they don't even realize what the benefit is. I don't know.
I think that's predominant in history. Like, you don't see a society that says you have to smear your hand with feces before you eat. That society isn't here for
They're all
long,
gone.
right? But sorry,
They're all
David.
gone.
Yeah.
No. Michael, I think you're right. And just to kind of throw in an anecdote from the other side of the thinking. The very first incidents when a person used statistics and mapping to understand a problem was the cholera outbreak, and I think it was in England,
In London, yeah.
London.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the guy's name, but he started mapping out all of the cholera deaths on a map of London. And he noticed there were no deaths on this one street corner. And there was a brewery there. The people drank beer instead of water.
Mhm. Yeah,
That-
and he also
There's the
found
case for alcohol.
he also found a well that was the source.
That's true.
But
Yeah, it
but,
was a sewer line or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Speaking of that, I'll be right back. I'm gonna get a beer.
anyway.
You
But-
immoral thing.
But Matthew, so you're gonna give us a second example. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it was fine. It was just because the bringing up the dogs. What it reminded me of was seeing a cute video one. Basically, so like someone with their dog they've had for a few years and a younger puppy, and like, okay, you have to sit before you get a treat. And the younger puppy wasn't sitting and didn't really necessarily know that, but the older dog looked at the smaller puppy and then put its paw on its butt and forced it to sit down.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know if that's really a moral situation. Like maybe there's like, hey, we want food. Food is yummy. Sit down so you get some food. But given that we also as humans may tend to try to impose certain morals on our dogs, and our dogs can sometimes seem to realize what's wrong. And see what's wrong, and sometimes will even like punish themselves, right? Like they realize they peed inside, and so they go off to their kennel because they know what they did was wrong and they have their head low, and like it's again, like Role was saying, we're kind of just guessing. Like we're trying to impose this moral experience upon them without actually knowing what it's like to be a dog.
Right.
But there does seem to be something recognizable there.
Well, I would want to point out that the latest research on dog psychology is really very interesting, and they do set apart dogs from all other animals, domesticated and whatever, as a different level in terms of, I don't know what it is, emotionality or whatever, like I'm going too far away, but dogs actually understand pointing. Few other animals understand that. Chimps don't understand pointing or where you're looking at. Dogs will look at where you're looking at. Chimps don't do that. But anyway, that's just an aside. Yeah. But I mean, another way to look at morality is in terms of what we think of to be moral acts invariably should be evolutionarily adaptive. That's probably something that why we evolved not killing people randomly, of not being breaking out in violent fits like chimpanzee males are liable to do.
So
Because if we did that, then we probably wouldn't be long as a species.
so
And I would just add, if I may, because I agree with what you're saying, I think. But in my view, it may be possible we're familiar with the phrase survival of the fittest.
Right.
And to my knowledge, Darwin never actually used that turn of phrase.
No,
But
that was
even-
Huxley.
even granting that, it's not survival of the fittest. It's survival of those who are best at adapting.
Right.
And adapting, in my mind, involves cooperation as much as it does competition.
Mhm.
And the example that I have for that is that we're actually made up of trillions of cells that we all think of as alive. Even in our brain, we think our brain is alive, and it probably is. But we don't use the entirety of our brain for consciousness. And we know that because some decisions can actually be detected before we're consciously aware of them. So there are these subroutines that are running all the time, and they give us the results. And sometimes we rationalize or we give reasons for how we feel or think or act, because of that. So, sorry, I got out and left you
No,
on that.
I mean, it also, I think we have to think also the fact that for most of Homo sapiens existence, we've been living as foraging societies, which are small bands of,
Oh yeah.
I don't know, yeah, and so if there are any built-in impulses or moral impulses, for lack of a better word, that we automatically that is subconscious for us. It will be impulses that are adaptive for small foraging bands rather than for complex societies that we live in now. And so we build on those basic impulses and then use our conscious thought, our intellect, our prefrontal cortex to interpret our current society, the whole complex world that we live in, and try to using our intellect, connect that with our basic impulses. And from there we decide, okay, this is what's right.
If I understand what you're saying, and I could be wrong, you tell me if I'm wrong.
And I could be wrong too.
It could be that our conclusions drive our reasons, rather than our reasons driving our conclusions.
Conclusions in terms of our basic impulses.
Yeah, behavior.
Yeah, certainly. I believe that.
Yeah, I think a lot of things are rationalized after the fact. First,
Yeah.
we decide they're right, then we decide why they're right.
Mhm.
I don't like that, but maybe that's how it is. I don't know.
I recall one study where this was with concerning patients with split hemispheres, but so they block the vision of one side or another, and they
Sure.
form someone through one eye to draw a picture, right, of something. And so they draw the picture, and then they ask the person, hey, why did you draw that picture? And they would never give the answer that, well, it would depend on the side of the brain. Like if it was the
left side.
right, one side, it was, yeah, if it was that, it was, oh yeah, because it told me to write it. But otherwise, with the other side of the brain, they would always be like, I heard bells ringing on the way here, or I saw a dog playing. There'd always be some order of rationalization that justified why they do that, which, okay, one could be a coincidence, but if you've done the experiment 10 times, and
Yeah.
every time they've drawn exactly what you told them
Right.
to do, and they've always justified it as something else, there's probably something to that.
Right.
That doesn't mean that
This-
every decision we ever make is like that, but it's
No.
definitely something that the human brain does.
Right. This yeah, that the human brain, and I think he called it the interpreter, right? It's makes up stories to justify itself. You know, I mean, and we're not even aware that we do that sometimes, or you know.
And Jonathan Haidt talked about that at length.
Yeah.
And, yeah, well, and I even think of sleep paralysis, like hallucinations during sleep paralysis. You have feeling like someone's pushing you down. It is always to justify why can't you move? Well, if you're not being able to move, it must be because someone's pushing you down. And so you actually start feeling somebody pushing you down,
Yeah.
despite the fact that there's nobody there.
I've experienced sleep paralysis, I think about 3 times in my life. And it does, you feel a tightening of your chest, like somebody, a weight bearing down on you, and it turns out it's some
It's
carjack.
ghosts. Don't you know that?
Yeah. No, my mind actually made up was this it's weird. You're asleep, but you're awake, and you know you can't move. And then my mind made up this lady in white lace sitting at the edge of my bed, and you know, but I knew it was something I was making up, but it's
See it, you
Please tell us the rest.
nothing happened after that. I knew it was a ghost, or I knew that I was imagining that it was a ghost, and even though I did not believe in ghosts at that point, but you know, it's scary though, because some people have died from sleep paralysis. You know, it goes on into a heart attack or something. It's related to a heart rhythm problem or something. But
I've had
anyway.
sleep paralysis before, but it was sort of a neutral experience for me. I think because I've heard of it before and I knew what it was, so it didn't really scare me.
Yeah, you know, it's different, right?
But like, people having like sleep-induced hallucinations, there are like scary stories on the internet of things people saw in their rooms while they were coming out of sleep. I've had that before, but fortunately not like scary, more like neutral or even kind of nonsensical.
Mhm.
Interesting. Yeah, I heard a few other people say that it was scary for them, but yeah, maybe if you're aware of it, it's not as bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would be interesting to ask like something that a lot of people would believe is wrong, like say murder is wrong. What does that statement mean? Does it just mean a lot of us wouldn't want to be murdered? Does it mean that murder, you wouldn't be able to sustain a society if you did it? Does it mean there's a God that's saying murder is wrong?
Yeah.
What does that statement mean?
Yeah, interesting. Murder is one of those things that are universal taboo. I think all societies have a prescription. You know, are view murder as immoral in terms of murder that's just killing a person for no valid reason.
So everyone agrees it's wrong, but what? Actually, is it really the other way? It's wrong because everyone says it's wrong. Like, yeah, like what do we mean when we say it's wrong?
I think ending the life or the existence of another sentient being
Mhm.
is wrong.
I agree.
Well,
but
Michael,
I'm
Unless he's
saying,
trying
what
to.
do we-
I think that's a good example, because it does make us think a little bit about what is morality as well. Because when they say it's wrong, I think what people are generally saying is that it's morally wrong. It's morally wrong, so it's something that you ought not to do.
Yeah.
As opposed to something that you ought to do. And that's really, I think, what people
my
are
mind
thinking
goes-
about. And they're not thinking about practical considerations. They're thinking about the act in itself,
No.
which does go back to
Yeah.
you know, this moral quality, which is not really just about practicality. It's about, I
Well-
think, you know, good or evil, you know, sin, though justice, injustice, those considerations.
But then, go ahead, David.
I think to a certain extent, we have empathy for other human beings, and
Right.
and we understand, or at least we think we understand what it's like to be another person.
Yes.
And to your question, Michael, which I think is a good question, I gravitate back to the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Right.
And which we've known for several thousand years. But so can that be logically justified? I don't know.
No.
I'm willing to grant it as an axiom,
Yeah.
only
Yeah,
because
hold
I
it.
haven't contemplated it enough.
In fact, I tend to believe the theorists who say that empathy is an adaptive evolutionary trait, that
Could be. Could be.
that we developed empathy, and that is why we flourished, or at least the human population has been as successful as it has been, because empathy leads to cooperation.
Well, and let me bring. Well, I think let's in a position to that. I would say let's go back to what Michael is asking, right? Why do people say that killing is wrong, right? When we say people say that killing is wrong, we're really saying our people say that killing is wrong, as in our context. I don't think that's even a universal rule, because if you look at other cultures, I mean, killing has not always traditionally been wrong, morally wrong. That is more of a Judeo-Christian value than anything else. Because if you look at there are a lot of cultures that do not consider killing in itself wrong. So that throws the whole thing into question.
I can assure you that many people who do not ascribe to the Judeo-Christian traditions believe that murder is wrong.
Right. And there is
Perhaps,
a
but-
notion that I'm saying it's a universal notion that there is such a thing as unjustified killing. And what is justified in whatever culture, in whatever society varies. There is the Christians have a notion of what is a justified killing. Other religions do, other foraging societies will have their notion of what is a justified killing, but so in terms of whether something is wrong because that thing, what the chicken egg thing, I think cultures develop notions of right or wrong, but the notions that they develop tend to have a certain adaptiveness to it, that it tends to be a benefit for that society to have that system of morality as designed by maybe the religion that they adopted, or maybe the whatever consensus that they reached.
But then I go back to, there's a lot of very sustainable systems of society that we wouldn't think are moral. Like slavery, you could say is sustainable. It's not moral though. So like I don't know if adaptiveness.
And if I can just interject, it didn't actually work out for the people who enslaved other people. It's not working out for them now.
But yeah, it didn't work out in the end. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of systems that could, like, I think like feudalism is kind of similar to slavery from what I've heard, and that lasted like hundreds of years, right? Or not thousands of years. So like you could have a sustainable system that most people wouldn't call moral. So yeah, I feel like maybe there's something more than just adaptiveness to the concept of morality, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I would also, and this doesn't mean I'm condoning it. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that I think in the societies that, for example, when you read about, Rome or Greece, I don't think there's a notion even among the enslaved peoples themselves that what's happening to them is immoral. It's unfortunate, it's a tragedy. I think the attitude is, oh my God, we lost the war and now I'm in this, but I don't think they're even, so in a sense, that is the moral system they live in, and well, this is my fate. My city lost the war and they killed all the men and enslaved all the women and children. And that doesn't mean that what happened to them isn't bad, but I'm just saying to
not
them
even
it's
thinking
not
about it.
yeah, it's not a matter of morality.
It kind of reminds me, I was watching this episode of Joe Rogan with Yeonmi Park. Have any of you heard of her? So she's a person who like escaped from North Korea.
Mhm.
And she talks about how some of the people there are, but like so many people there are so starved and hungry. Like when you look at them, they're just pure skin and bones, but you don't even like feel that it's bad because you're just kind of so used to seeing it all the time. Maybe morality's so this is kind of a dangerous place to go, but kind of going back to what Raul said, maybe if you live in a time where something is just so commonplace and that's the way it is, like you don't even think of it as being immoral. Yeah, I don't know.
So one of the things that, if my understanding is correct, and my source for this is speaking to one person who was an anthropologist, but a couple people were anthropologists. But if what has been found is oftentimes different societies that live in similar environments, even if they're on opposite sides of the globe, will have a lot of similarities in their various cultural practices extending to certain moral beliefs. They won't be identical, but they will bear more similarity to each other than sometimes even neighboring societies which have drastically different environments. So I do think on that basis there is merit to the claim that to some extent what your surroundings, your environment, and I don't mean to mean your natural environment, like wooded versus mountain. Also, what types of other people are around you? What of course can what's your state of technology? Many factors there can influence cultures or societies' moral values.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't object to that at all. Go ahead.
Well, this makes me think. I'm still stuck in the original question: what is morality? So one thing that I think in all these cases that we're having this discussion of morality, it seems that one thing that is common to all these questions is that, and these situations, is that when you are discussing things that are related to morality, you're not telling people not to do something or to do something because it's practical, because of the benefits. What you're really saying is, well, you shouldn't do this, even though that's going to benefit you. You shouldn't do this because the thing itself is wrong. So it's something that it's not about the logic of things, which is how we usually make decisions. This is what is peculiar about moral decisions, is that even when you should do something because it benefits you, for example, let's say you should keep your slaves, if you're a plantation owner, that will certainly benefit you. But but when someone says, well, slavery is wrong and you should in fact release your slaves, free your slaves, it's not about practicality. It's not about what's going to benefit you or not. It's really about something that is it kind of goes beyond that. It's about you should do this because it's right, because it's not about practicality. It's because for some reason you consider this to be a wrong behavior in all instances. So, and I don't know if this is peculiar to the human race. It might be a peculiar thing to the human race. I'm not really sure.
So, or conversely, Bruno, you fight a war over it and you lose. And that's how the decision gets made, rather than anything having to do with, oh, I morally think that this is no longer right. No, I'll go and fight a war about it, and it turns out we lose to the other guys. So I guess that must make it right then.
Fight makes right.
I don't think
Let's-
anybody's saying that.
That's kind of a different. The people in the North, like in that case, if we're going to talk about that specific scenario, like the people in the North, they believed that slavery was wrong, but they didn't believe that because of practical terms, right? Just to reinforce the example, they believe that as a principle, everybody's equal. And because maybe that's why people thought slavery was wrong in that case.
We lost your audio. I lost your audio, Bruno.
Oh.
Maybe everybody did.
It's the freaking internet. Can you hear me again?
Yeah,
So-
just maybe the sentence right.
So I think that perhaps the reason why in that particular case, the people thought that slavery was wrong, whereas in the past, that wasn't really a widely held belief, is that because perhaps the American ideas of equality, you know, that created the republic, that created the nation, it really is difficult. If you're going to create a nation, and the whole point is that people are supposed to be equal.
You're cutting in and out. Sorry.
I'm sorry. If the whole point is that people are supposed to be equal, and then you're going to have slaves, I mean, that doesn't make sense. And I think it's very hard to justify that belief. So that might be, maybe it was part of the case, but you know, regardless, sometimes people make these decisions that something is wrong just because it's wrong, because it's not because of a logical thing. It's not because of practicality. It's even if that's good for you, you still shouldn't do it. Like when you tell a kid you shouldn't go into that store and steal bubble gum. It's not, I mean, for the kid, it's good to steal bubble gum provided he doesn't get caught. I mean, it's good for him, but you're teaching him that the act of stealing is wrong in itself, right? And this is what defines, I think, these moral choices and these moral rules.
I understand what you're saying, but I personally believe that the kid who steals a pack of bubble gum, or the plantation owner that enslaves people, as a practical matter, it is not good for their lives. And that's my opinion.
So in the case of the plantation owner, let's say it's like way before the Civil War. There hasn't been any debate about whether slavery is wrong yet. Why would it be?
There actually was.
Or there still was discussion even way back. But I mean, we can. There has to be some situation where you can get away with it. Like there has to be. But like we can always say, well,
people got away with slavery for tens of thousands of years, you know. So I don't think really
there has to be a situation where you could be confident you could get away with it. I mean, I'm not saying I like those situations. I wish those situations didn't exist. I wish whenever you did something bad, you'd probably get caught and say you shouldn't do it. But there's got to be situations where you'll probably get away with it.
Well, we can
So the
go back
question is,
to
those situations.
we can go back to Matt's example of the masturbation. You know, imagine this teenager. You know, he's looking at this really nice poster. You know, he's not going to have a girlfriend for a couple of years. You know, and he he gets tempted by this very nice. You know, this very nice
something about
woman in the wall. You know. And
we now know your autobiography, Bruno.
No, in terms of masturbation, I don't think anyone arrives at the conclusion that masturbation is immoral without society telling him it is, or her. Okay, let's be equal opportunity here. I can't imagine somebody who decides that this thing that gives me much pleasure is bad. You know, unless society told him growing up that no, don't do that. That's bad. You'll go
I think
blind.
Elon Musk said
Yeah.
that. No, but so I've heard like some people say by not doing it, and I feel like maybe this is kind of a contrived argument, but some people say that by not doing it, it encourages you more to seek out another mate, a girlfriend. So it encourages you more to try to find another mate rather than just staying by yourself. I don't
Right,
but
DNA has been doing
I
that
mean,
for
I-
millions of years.
But
I'm gonna add.
I think that regardless of that, though, I mean, regardless, the decision not to do something, it's not really because he wants the benefit of it, because he's going to benefit from not doing it. It's really more about the fact that he thinks that it's wrong, that by doing that, it's wrong. That's why he's not going to do it. That's why he won't steal the money from his mother's purse, for example. It's not because it's, she probably wouldn't know. Let's say she probably wouldn't notice, if he stole like $10 or something, go out and buy some Coca-Cola and a burger, like it would benefit him stealing from her, those $10, but he would feel very bad about it. So in that sense, he wouldn't benefit from that. But it's really about the action. In his mind, it's not right. And that same mechanism can be applied to slavery, can be applied to the stealing pack of bubble gum, can be applied to not murdering. That is, I think, the foundation, regardless of what we're talking about or the degree. I think that's the foundation of what's moral and what's immoral, is that notion.
So there's one thing that came to my mind. We lost some of what you said, Bruno, unfortunately, but I do think I think I get the gist of what you're saying. And what it made me think of is because everyone we've discussed this already. How like people tend to you say, why is this wrong? And then not only will have an answer. The answer doesn't always make sense to us, but usually they'll have some answer. One of the answers that I think I've come across very frequently, especially just on internet forums or even honestly in the chat here, I think it's been mentioned at least once on the side chat. But people calling certain behavior degenerate, right? It's degenerate. What does that even mean, right? But it's but there seems to be sometimes certain behaviors that people might engage in that we find unsettling or disgusting. And it's not just ew, that's gross, don't do that around me kind of. It's just man, like if you're doing that must reflect you as a person. Like you must be a person and must be, as bad as that thing that you're like, and like whether like that, like whether it be someone's position on gay sex or incest or bestiality, and we can make for any of those people have tried to, and I do agree with some of them in the case of bestiality, for example, arguments of why this is a good thing. But a lot of people probably are disgusted far sooner than they are rationalizing why this is a bad thing. They say that's really this bad, gross behavior right there, and that's just the sexual side of things. There's other categories of non-sexual where people say that's degenerate behavior, but that seems to be a very a common word I see used. I'm being blurry, aren't I?
Oh yeah, I did see your camera's got more blurry.
I don't know what's going on with that.
No, I do agree with you, Matthew, wholeheartedly, and probably you read this from Jonathan Haidt, that disgust is one of those basic impulses that or emotions that we have that contributes to developing our sense of morality. Like, I mean, incest is another universal taboo, and it's really from disgust, right? And
Well, actually, that one I think might be
No.
more practical, kind of, because like yeah, it's not really clear why you'd be more disgusted.
well, and
Um,
here's the thing, that it's not that you sense that a person is your genetic relative. The sense of disgust, from researchers seem to say, is that children who grew up together in a household do not develop romantic attractions toward each other, or are less likely to develop romantic attraction towards each other. So it's not really that I can sense my DNA in her. It's really people you grew up with. Is just the term. Oh, that's like dating my sister.
so even if they were adopted, you wouldn't
Yes,
be
that's
attracted to
true. I think one experiment was with Israeli kibbutzes, or not experiment, but research, that the marriage between children who grew up in the same kibbutz is below the average. This
Right.
exogamy is and so that's a moral precept that I would willingly accept is basically biological in origin.
Well, it's like cannibalism as well. I think being a cannibal is similar to that. There's an instinct that you shouldn't be eating other people, I think.
Right.
I would
And
imagine
not that-
even if someone's like an adopted sibling, it like psychologically it probably still taps into that same mechanism that's preventing you from mating with your sibling.
yeah,
So
yeah.
at the same time, when it comes, maybe that's the case for ourselves, but I wonder how much that really plays into. Oh, I'm clear again, yay! That plays into our disgust towards others' behaviors. So just looking at media, for example, one of the things that I noticed that almost kind of surprised me, but watching the Umbrella Academy, which they're all adopted children growing up since they were babies, and two of the characters have a romantic sexual interest, and it's just played off not even as incestual. It's just like, oh, these two people are interested in each other, but they were raised in the same household in the same name. It is fiction, of course, but the question is, how do people react to it? And I was surprised to find that there was there was very minimal negative reaction to that being in the TV show. And whenever I happened to ask somebody who had seen the TV show, what they thought about that, they're like, oh, they're not related, it's fine.
Right.
That was usually the reaction. Like, and they think about it for a little bit, like, okay, that's a little weird and unusual, but but at the end of the day, I guess they're not related, it's fine. So now this is based on my anecdotes now, but it does seem to me that the outward disgust of other people's behavior may relate more to the concept of the biology of it, at least today in modernity, than the adoptedness. Because conversely, you have certain cultures where you want to keep, that doesn't say things in the family per se, but you want to keep things within your class, and sometimes that class means within the family, even if that might be like your cousins or second cousins. That's everyone that encapsulates your entire social status. So that's less disgusting than engaging with someone who is a different class.
No, I mean, even when I say that disgust is sort of, like a primal impulse, it is certainly a disgusting reaction can be solicited through social conditioning, all right? And we have the capacity to feel disgust, and maybe there are some things that we naturally are, through evolution, we automatically feel disgust towards, but that doesn't mean that either you can be, for lack of a better word, conditioned to overcome that disgust, or to generate the exact same disgusting reaction towards something or somebody who you normally wouldn't feel any disgust. And this goes to in-group, out-group dynamics. Like, before you are able to convince a population to commit genocide of another population, what's in the formula there? You try to develop disgust towards the victim population by basically dehumanizing them. I mean, that's the genocide playbook, right?
Propaganda.
And yeah, exactly. And so part of morality too is all these things about in-group, out-group dynamics, like between when people started to think that actually enslaving other people is immoral. And I think the term used is they have enlarged their circle of empathy. That's one way people state it, and that what used to be an out group that was okay to treat them as non-humans no longer is okay, because you enlarge your circle and say, no, they are like us. They're not any different from us. And so you treat them the way you would treat people you always considered to be your part of your group. So complex.
Well, I think
I
that.
think a lot of
Go ahead, Michael.
okay. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think a lot of what makes morality tricky is I feel like we do have an innate sort of biological sense of morality, but the problem is the morality that we evolved over time, it's very much based on heuristics that may not apply to every situation.
Right.
So the evolved morality is only approximate, and it doesn't, and that's part of the problem. So there's a lot of things that might disgust us that in fact don't reduce our survival chances at all. And there's a lot of things that really seriously affect our survival, but we haven't yet evolved the morality for that.
Right.
So I think that's.
I was reading a bit ago that like our sense of disgust can have a lot of false positives.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
I would
Yeah,
believe that.
I was reading, it was something about why do people, like, why is there a sense of, I don't know how to put it, like mild repulsiveness maybe about people who might look different from you.
I really like what you just said. Our sense of disgust can have a lot of false positives.
mm-hmm.
A good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's for example, if you walked towards, you're in a foraging society and you saw something rustle in the bushes, a person who walks towards any rustling in the bushes every time he or she sees the bushes rustling might not survive for long, while the person who walks away from any rustling bushes probably will have a longer lifespan. And so I agree. I mean, morality isn't really moral, at least at the very beginning. It's the set of actions or reactions that give you a better chance of surviving longer, for a longer period of time and having more children.
I feel like when we really think something is moral very strongly, often that's really a sense of fear, or really just like let's say you see your kid go into the store, steal a bubble gum, and come out. If that keeps happening enough times, that will cause a danger to you. Like so maybe that one time they'll get away with it, but if they keep up that pattern, it's bound to end up in an unfortunate situation. So a lot of times when we feel really strongly that something about stealing that bubble gum is wrong, maybe it's really just an intense fear, like a fear Is there anything that we really strongly believe is wrong? That's a good question.
Well, but
Actually, Matthew brought up the masturbation example. Is there anything that we really strongly think is wrong, but will almost surely have no consequences? Can we think of something like that? Like this is well, what about desecration? Like a lot of times blasphemy, like that I think that's a good example. So when people say blasphemy, like they'll say something bad about God or whatever, and people say that is so bad. That is like really, really bad that you said that, even though it has no actual sort of practical well, I guess if people hear you say it, then I mean, maybe it does have more practical consequences. I don't know. But yeah, what are some examples of things that we feel are really, really bad, but wouldn't have consequences? That's kind of what I'm interested in.
Well, if I can just interject here, and this is not a mature thought, but it occurs to me that there aren't any things that don't have an impact on your life. You know, for example, a slaveholder. The first time that a slaveholder bought a slave, there was damage to the slaveholder's life. Not to mention the slave, but to the slaveholder's life, in my opinion.
Well, I don't think so. Like, why would you say that? If we're talking moral terms, I mean, yes, but we're not talking. That's not what he's asking.
Especially in moral terms.
No, but he's asking other than that, like, in what way would that make it worse for him? Like, if we're not talking about morals, if we're talking about just practicality, like, in what way was it?
As a practical matter, as a moral matter?
No, but in a practical matter, why was it bad? In a moral matter, yes, but in a practical matter, why was it bad?
When a person pays for another to be in servitude to them, in my opinion, it damages not just the person in servitude, but the person to whom the servitude is expected.
Is the damage?
They feel bad about it? Is it because it distorts their view of reality? Is it
yes,
those two?
Would you say for the sake of easiness that the android isn't conscious, can't feel pain, but can do the work as much as a slave could?
probably not today, but perhaps in the future. Because there is, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, there is nothing special about the atoms that make up our brain. And the atoms that make up the intelligence that we are inventing, that is learning for itself, who are we to say that we are the pinnacle of morality and intelligence? We're in my opinion, we're not.
For sure, but from the practical, that was my question, was focusing on the practical. Like, would this hypothetical machine and it doesn't actually matter, I think, so much what our opinions are. Would a machine like that end up being conscious or not? Let's just assume that somehow we know that it's not, right? The secret of how consciousness works, and so we're able to make a machine.
I don't think so.
from a practical standpoint.
But the thing that I value is not biology, it's sentience. And I think it is a little, to me, it is somewhat myopic to think that intelligence can only exist in biology.
Sure, and that's like, and that can be absolutely the case. But I mean, I could also replace an android with a zombie, and more of a modern zombie, not the historical zombie where you have a living person that you're controlling. But like the person's dead, and you're just using we magic. We animate the dead to do the labor for us. They're not like right. So that way, that can take off that like the important part is that they're not conscious or feeling pain. That's the
a world where sentience doesn't matter.
no, that's not. I'm not saying the sentience doesn't matter in the world. That's not the claim. The claim is where the ability to do complex labor, such as let's say plowing a field, like let's say simple farming, just doing the farming for us, where the capability to perform that labor doesn't have to be associated by necessity to consciousness, right?
I am not able to define sentience or consciousness. I'm not eligible for that Nobel Prize.
I mean, you don't have to, right? That's beyond the scope of the question. The point is, I'm trying to evaluate because your argument about the practical standpoint still seemed to hinge somewhat on the consciousness or the sentience of the human slave, and so what I'm trying to, well, at least that's what I'm trying to figure out is if we were able to remove that factor, does the practical aspect change, or is it independent? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is there's an actual connection between these variables in your argument? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I totally do not follow you.
Let's
No, I think
we're reaching
Okay.
we're kind of like reaching 9 o'clock, so maybe we can finish the discussion soon. So what do you guys have any like takeaways? Have we been able to kind of like shed some light into the question of what morality is, or not? Just from my part, like from my side, like a final something that I've kind of thought about while we're talking. It seems that morality, to me, I think it's kind of like a byproduct of something that is even that comes even before morality, which is like some values that inform our view of the world, and that in turn seems to determine if we think that something is right or wrong, morality, right? I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's why, for example, slavery would be an example. If your value is equality, slavery all of a sudden seems like that's something that would be wrong. If we're not talking about today, we're talking about the mentality of people in the 17th century or the 18th century. Or for example, something else like fairness, like if fairness is if you see the world in terms of fairness, perhaps extreme income inequality might seem that it's something ultimately wrong, whereas if fairness is not your major consideration, if you're more interested in say hard work or freedom or whatever it is, maybe you have a slightly different conception of things. But it seems that the conclusion that if something is wrong or something is right ultimately comes from something else that is that informs that decision to say that something is wrong or right or wrong.
I would add, because it hasn't come up, is that somewhere in the root of morality is the infliction of pain. I think that's the basic thing that when we try to arrive at something that we believe is moral, a moral system, a lot of it is about trying not discomfort and pain and the other peoples and other entities, because when we try to think about morality and what's the root of moral thinking among human beings.
So there is, I think that's oftentimes the case. I don't know if it's always the case. I don't know if I would say that. I'm also thinking a little bit where Michael was going off. He was talking about he was mostly talking about blasphemy, but he also brought up desecration. And I think you could probably make an argument in both cases. Oh, if you're blasphemous, people, and that could spread, and then people would go to hell. Or a desecration, if you believe in life after death, that can affect things. But in the case of desecration, also that seems to extend sometimes beyond, affecting the the spirit of a possible perceived spirit of a person, right?
Right.
You can desecrate a revered place that's not necessarily spiritual, but maybe historical, right?
Right.
You can people in almost a moral outrage talk about the destruction of Troy upon its discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
And almost, I don't think any of those people are like thinking about, all the souls, that are affected by the destruction of Troy. They might be thinking of maybe the knowledge that's lost or something along those lines, but it seems to be almost secondary to me.
Right. But there are people who get appalled, really feel psychological pain when they see desecration of something that is sacred to them.
Sure.
And so it's, again, you're refereeing.
But that seems to be circular then, because then, it's bad because I want to avoid, because it can cause other people's pain. But then a reason why it causes people pain is because they think it's bad.
No, it's not bad. I'm not saying that if it causes people pain that it's bad. I'm saying this negotiation about how much of our pain we'll say is okay, I can live with that, but you should have to be willing to live with this as well. That's what a system of morality tries to arrive at. Not exclusive, not just that, but that's one of the things that we want to reach.
Yeah, I want to say I feel like morality is very heavily based on heuristics. So it's very much approximate, and the things that we feel are morally bad might not actually in every situation end up producing bad consequences, but it's just a rough heuristic.
Right.
So like when we say like the whole idea, like I think a lot of religion and how they have their god or goddesses or whoever that they follow, a lot of it is kind of a heuristic for doing the right thing that might in certain cases result in the right outcome, but in other cases not. But it's very, very approximate. So like when we talk about desecration, I feel like that's like a very high level of like basically you believe that you should follow the god or goddess or whoever because the other people in your society kind of believe that, have discussed it with you, etc., etc. And then if you desecrate that god or goddess, then the other people in the society will look unfavorably at you, and might, I don't know, but like fight against you, or like view you as a bad person. So it's kind of like a very high level heuristic of good and evil. But I feel like there's so much approximation in trying to figure out what the right thing is to do that you're going to have errors. You're going to have like the bush. You're going to see the bush rumbling, and you're going to run away when there was really nothing in the bush. You're going to have lots of false positives. So yeah, they're the roughest heuristics that you can have.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think what's the complexity of modern society is that we have to interpret everything that we're experiencing, and then down to the level that we can apply our heuristics that interpret it down to level that our heuristics apply. But still, on top of that, then we continue to use our reasoning and say, okay, even if it agrees with our heuristics, if we look at it closer, is that really something that I should think is immoral? It's just so complex. The cost of living in modern society.
Yeah, we have to keep revisiting our heuristics because there might be cases where they're way off. So yeah, with the pace that society's advancing at, it's like we have to revise our heuristics more than ever because we're always finding things. Like for example, if you go to the doctor and get a shot, well, that feels really painful, right? Like let's say it's either a vaccine or I don't know, some other kind of shot. It hurts a lot, but it's actually it's actually very beneficial for you, right? So we have to keep revising our heuristics,
right,
over and over.
Well, I think what you're saying is that we have to reevaluate what it is we value. For example, if you value being alive, you might undergo the scalpel.
Yeah, exactly.
And run some risk. Now, let me just say, and because I know Bruno has had it with us. But
no, I mean, I enjoyed the conversation. It's just I don't want people to get bored of us more.
No, you're fine. You're totally fine. Let me just say that this is a very interesting question, and all of these points of view that have been expressed factor into my thinking on this subject, which is good. And Matthew, I hope you'll come back. You are a remarkable addition to these other guys.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, I still have the other commitment, so I may come back occasionally when.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
There's a particular topic that I'm like, this is just something. Like there was actually one a while ago that I wanted to do, but like it wasn't just my normal Friday. Like I was actually had a written like almost in stone commitment, so I couldn't make that one. Like I was traveling that Friday. That was the one on religion. I forget the particular details of that. But I wanted to make that one, and I could not. But but if certain topics show up that that I feel like I have a lot to contribute to, then I may well. I also I guess the unfortunate bit is that then some of the people here wouldn't be able to contribute. But I also miss doing this in the coffee shop. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
um.
Yeah.
But
Well, you were
What
there.
world?
You were there last week, right? Did you go last week? No, some people got.
those were the brewery. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
The in-person one last week. Yes, yes. I did go to that, and that was
You meet in a brewery?
And the discussion gets more interesting
yes.
as the
Yeah.
evening
You know,
passes.
sometimes I have a group that gathers here and we have espressos and beer. And
That's
you know,
good.
coffee to sharpen the tongue and alcohol to loosen it.
It's good.
So,
Yeah.
Uh,
No, we'll get together, and I'm sure Matthew will come back for some of these discussions, and we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Maybe the scheduling is part of the problem because Fridays are not good for you. So
yeah, that's really the big thing. I think, and it still depends. Like there's I'll have other things going on the days sometimes, but Friday for certain is a little bit more challenging.
Well, we're more important than anything else you have to do.
of course. Those should be your values.
Yeah.
But yeah, let me end the podcast here. Thanks for watching, if anyone was watching. And I hope you enjoyed our discussion about morality.